Tower Banner 53 is ready for departure. Okay.
An intensive care unit in the sky.
Who's tying these bags down?
An emergency room like you've never seen before.
They are critical patients. They've got trauma injuries.
Flying over a battle zone, half a world away from home. Manned by brave volunteers from Colorado, tending to the war's most severely wounded.
I can make sure that they get home, and that's really important.
And we've been invited on board. Tonight, in a Fox 31 Denver Home from War special, assignment Afghanistan.
Good evening. Thanks for joining us for this Fox 31 Denver news special. I'm Jeremy Hubbard, coming to you tonight from Afghanistan. We've traveled 7,000 miles here to this Southwest Asian nation, and right now we're standing in the middle of Bagram Airfield. And this is a setting actually not unlike Denver in some ways. We're about a mile high in elevation here. There are beautiful snow-capped peaks off in the distance, and the weather's about the same as Colorado this time of year too. But that is where the similarities end. This is still very much a war zone, and 11 and a half years after 9/11, there are American troops dying here still in numbers that are too large. It's no place to call home, but yet for some Coloradans, it is home, at least temporarily. They're medics, emergency room doctors and nurses who practice back home in Colorado, but have left their spouses and families and jobs and come here to an environment that's often unfriendly and unwelcoming. And tonight, in a Fox 31 Denver News exclusive, they've invited us along for the ride.
Tower Banner 53 is ready for departure.
We are lifting off from a well-worn runway.
That's at 18 Lima Romeo, Bagram departure.
Half a world away from home. On board at the controls, a cockpit crew cool and calm.
Good, I see 130 going north right in front of us.
Considering what we're soon passing above.
Flashing 0333, passing 5,500.
One of the most dangerous spots on the globe.
20 miles south of Kabul.
Down here below, in the shadow of the towering Hindu Kush Mountains, amid the mud huts and dusty villages, is the battleground of the longest war the U.S. has ever fought.
So everyone just please fight first. We need to start getting equipment on board, so let's speed it up. Lift.
And we're hopscotching this hostile territory by air with some familiar faces from back home in Colorado.
All right, up here, sir. Thank you.
A flight crew that sees the trauma of the war on terror firsthand daily.
We're going to take care of whoever needs to be taken care of. Ready?
Air Force Reserve Captain Deanna Leba is in charge here. Back home in her regular life, she's an orthopedic nurse and mother of 3 from Colorado Springs. But here in Afghanistan, her emergency room is the cramped fuselage of a cargo plane.
Are you ready for this?
Stretchers dangling from the ceiling. It's an air ambulance flown into some of the most hazardous hotspots in the country.
Do we have one litter and one ambulatory patient?
The captain and these other reservists from Peterson Air Force Base in Colorado Springs are medics picking up the war wounded, victims of IED blasts and other battle injuries, and stabilizing and treating them en route to better equipped hospitals in Germany and back home in the U.S.
We see double amputees, we see brain injuries, we see eye injuries, we see, they're just really hurt.
Senior Airman Aaron Smith is from Parker, a student at CU Denver studying nursing.
No tingling, no pain right now.
What better classroom than this, treating this soldier who it turns out suffered an ankle injury. We pick him up in Jalalabad, a notorious danger zone that Osama bin Laden once called home.
98% SpO2 on room air.
While they check his vitals, we lift off again, lumbering toward another outpost and even more wounded. All the while, the crew aboard aware of the hazards they too could face. These planes have been known to have close calls with rockets and bombs and gunfire themselves.
At some stops, the danger is more severe than others, like at this one at a village called Shank in the mountainous area near the Pakistan border. There's intelligence that says Americans are in danger here, and that's why for this stop, they've assigned us and the crew these bulletproof vests.
Armed guards protect the flight crew as they load up the most serious casualties yet, 2 soldiers from the Afghan army who suffered massive internal injuries in a rollover accident.
Try to lift.
And they are critical patients. They've got trauma injuries. Careful.
One of the men has internal bleeding. He's hooked up to a breathing tube, and there's some fear he might not make it. Both soldiers are in bad shape, given constant care mid-flight, just in case something goes wrong.
I think the hardest thing is the pain. and just managing the pain.
Any doctor or nurse will tell you there's a special feeling that comes from helping people who need it most. But for this Colorado crew, the feeling is amplified considering who the majority of their patients are.
It's very humbling to be taking care of our guys that have sacrificed everything for our country, our nation, and people. And now I can get back to them, and I can make sure that they get home. And that's really important.
And speaking of home, that is where First Lieutenant Ann Barnes can't wait to go.
I have 3 kids at home, so I'm anxious to get back to them.
It is constantly on the minds of this crew, though the mountain sunsets like this one outside Kabul often remind them of Colorado's Front Range. It can hardly erase the reality of what they deal with every day.
Ready.
And it's no substitute for what awaits some 7,000 miles away when this deployment finally ends.
I'm very ready to go back home. I miss my husband and my kids, but as far as the experience, I wouldn't trade it for anything.
And a quick update on those Afghan soldiers. We talked to one of the medics who treated them, and he said while their injuries are severe, both men are expected to survive those wounds. When we come back tonight, we're lifting off from our base here in Afghanistan and going airborne, headed to Germany and the most advanced military hospital in the world, where 99% of the patients who walk in the door also walk out. But what happens when one of them doesn't make it? We're there as a soldier pays the ultimate price, and we'll tell you the special tribute paid to him by some Colorado nurses. Welcome back to our Fox 31 Denver News Special. We have traveled across the globe to bring you the stories of everyday Coloradans who put their own lives on hold to save the lives of others. We're going back to Afghanistan in just a few minutes, but for now our journey has brought us here to Germany and a place called Landstuhl Regional Medical Center. When someone's seriously injured in Afghanistan, they're brought here. And unfortunately, 11 years into this war, there is still no shortage of patients. On this day in the ICU, they've been treating a soldier injured in a bomb blast. A soldier who is about to die. His family's been flown in from the United States to say their goodbyes. And for a nurse we met from Boulder, this is, as you might imagine, the most difficult part of the job.
They arrive by the busload. Injured soldiers, survivors of IED blasts and other war wounds, brought here to an American hospital on foreign soil. These are the busy hallways of Landstuhl Regional Medical Center in Germany, where more than 60,000 patients have been treated since the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan began. Including on this day, Nathan Schurter, an Army sergeant who just days earlier in Afghanistan had a brush with death when his Army buddy stepped on an IED right next to him.
Got him, got me and my saw gunner right behind me.
What's your name? Sure.
The homemade bomb turning the terrain into shrapnel, hurling pebbles, dirt, and sticks at him, embedding them in his skin.
Some of the bigger holes are, rocks that are in there. It doesn't sound like much, but it works.
We need to flush his IV out.
The wounds stretch from his torn-up leg to his ruptured eardrum.
Major, we ready?
And here, to help make the pain go away, is a nurse we met from Denver.
Yeah, let's keep it tight for the load.
Taylor Ludwig went to Denver West High School. He used to work at St. Anthony's. But a while back, he decided he wanted to treat American heroes. So he picked up and moved to Germany.
It's really a wonderful opportunity, a very humbling experience to work with this patient population. And so every day I feel honored to be included in this group.
For Taylor and the other medics here, the goal is to tend to soldiers like Nathan and get them back home to their loved ones in the U.S. as fast as possible, usually just 2 or 3 days after they've been injured in the battlefield. Compare that to Vietnam, when it often took a month and a half to get them back home. For Taylor, it's the least he can do for men and women who do so much.
Hey, Sergeant, thanks for everything you do, partner.
And while 99% of the injured service members who show up here at Landstuhl do make it back home, occasionally the heartbreaking happens here. On the very day we visit Landstuhl, so does the family of Army Staff Sergeant Nicholas Reed. They've hurried here from the U.S. to say goodbye to their son and brother. A bomb disposal expert, just days earlier, he suffered massive wounds when one of those bombs went off.
He was injured here in Afghanistan, down in the Kandahar province, one of the most dangerous parts of this still very dangerous country. He held on for 4 days, but the 26-year-old's wounds were just too severe. There was no way he could have survived.
The young soldier was flown here to Landstuhl and honored in an emotional Purple Heart ceremony right there in the ICU, in front of his family, nurses, and doctors before he passed away.
The ones that stick with you are people who did not survive, because you get the most emotionally vested in those.
Lisa Boatwright works in that ICU. It's a world away from her early days as a nursing student at the University of Colorado and her job at Swedish Medical Center.
Neurosurgery is okay with him flying.
There's something different when your patients are heroes, she says, and you're the one who has to deliver the heartbreaking news.
For me, that's the hardest part of the job, is talking to that emotional wife or parents or someone on the other end of the phone.
Around here, soldiers like Nick Reed leave their mark and leave behind the monumental task for medics of trying to mourn those few who don't get to go home while still focusing on the many who do. His story is the exception. They say that if you can make it to this hospital, you have about a 99% chance of survival. When we come back, we're lifting off from here in Germany, headed back to the battlefield and Afghanistan, where we found the comforts of home. What is day-to-day life like for Colorado warriors deployed 7,000 miles away? In a few ways, it's actually not that different from what they're used to. We'll tell you about that when we come back. Welcome back to our Fox 31 Denver News Special. We've been flying over Afghanistan with some Colorado medics on what they call a bandage run. Basically, they fly to different bases across the country, pick up the wounded, treat them in midair, and then drop them off at a bigger hospital. Right now, we've stopped in the capital city of Kabul, where they've dropped off a couple of critically injured patients. You know, for a medic, it's no easy task when your emergency room is the belly of a bumpy cargo plane. So what do you do to relieve this stress? What do you do in your time off? And what's a typical weekend like in Afghanistan? They let us tag along to find out.
Where's the nurse? Do they have outboard? We have one litter and one ambulatory patient.
Theirs is a hectic job.
8% SpO2 on room air.
Colorado medics flying in and out of the battlefield, picking up war wounded,
No numbness, no tingling, no pain right now.
treating them in a makeshift ER that's been cobbled together in the belly of a cargo plane.
Cat refill's good.
Talk about stress.
We are done after this. We're going home.
So what do you do on your time off? What exactly do you do on a weekend in Afghanistan? Surprisingly, some of the same things you do exactly 7,322.39 miles back home in Colorado.
I think they're going to start a Star Wars marathon.
That sign hangs outside this building at Bagram Airfield, where those medics from Peterson Air Force Base in Colorado Springs spend much of their downtime.
On a day like this, when we're off, we spend a lot of time together. We've kind of built a family here.
Here, the walls are covered with reminders of Colorado, and there are lots of comforts of home. And just a few buildings over, the comfort foods of home.
The Popeyes and the Pizza Hut's pretty new, so just a place to feel like home.
Yep, fast food in the battle zone. There's even a coffee shop.
She got me a white chocolate mocha.
If not for all the uniforms and those unusual-looking Coke cans, this might as well be a mall food court in Denver.
When you're on alert, you kind of find things to keep you busy, so this is always a nice place to hang out.
But just about the time the crew looks outside and sees those snowy mountains just like the ones back home and forgets for just a moment where they really are. All right, so show us home sweet home here.
It's right in here.
Reality sets back in.
All
So,
right.
wow, this has got to be less than 100 square feet.
Yeah.
And this is what you call home?
This is where I sleep and Skype the family and just kind of wind down.
For 21-year-old Chris Basham of Fountain, Colorado, reality here is a tiny plywood room, barely big enough for a bed.
This is the only private space we get.
He decorates the place with reminders of home, mostly pictures of his girlfriend, who he Skypes with all the time and can't wait to see again. He often retreats here for solitude while all those women in his unit hang out together.
All right, so this is the bazaar.
On this day, they took us shopping at a marketplace manned by local villagers eager to make a buck off Americans with little else to spend their military pay on.
Couple hundred?
Couple hundred.
And it's here that we meet an unexpected merchant, a young man who looks like he's been watching some American reality TV. You look very American.
I've heard that. I heard sometimes they call me Jersey Shore.
The Western influence on 24-year-old Jaweed is pretty evident, from the spiky hairdo to those designer clothes. He was just 13 years old when this war started, working as a translator. He quickly embraced the American troops, and when he opened his shop selling blankets and scarves, those Americans became his friends and most generous customers. On a good day here at the bazaar, Jaweed clears about $400 American. Compare that to the average Afghan who makes just $7 to $10 a day. Easy to understand why he's not eager for the Americans to leave.
We're happy people make money off of them, and everyone's happy. People hate you guys leave Afghanistan.
Which shop did you get the necklace?
But like it or not, they will be leaving, almost every American service member, by the end of next year. And this crew from Colorado even sooner. Their deployment just days from being over.
Now that one's got a pretty color to it.
So they're bartering for souvenirs.
12.
13.
12.
Okay.
Okay.
Stocking up on reminders of a place that's been a nice home away from home, but nowhere near as good as the real thing.
Colorado girl.
A small glimpse at what life is like when you're 7,000 miles away from home in Colorado, in a war zone in Afghanistan. When we come back, some final thoughts from our time on the ground and in the air above Afghanistan, and how these folks stay in touch with their loved ones back home. Welcome back to our Fox 31 Denver News Special as we wrap up tonight from Afghanistan. You notice we've donned a helmet and bulletproof vest, and that's because some security forces airmen tell us that they overheard some gunfire coming from this village near Bagram Airfield just last night, so they don't want to take any chances while we're standing up here. Now, as we say goodnight to you tonight, we have a look at how some of those Colorado reservists say goodnight to their loved ones back in our state. Imagine you're a mom, you're half a world away from your kids, you've missed Christmas and New Year's and birthdays too. How do you stay in touch? Well, it turns out all it takes is some will and some Wi-Fi.
Inside the razor wire, surrounded by the concrete blast walls that circle Bagram Airfield in Afghanistan, with the constant hum of military aircraft buzzing overhead. Not exactly the best place to honeymoon.
A lot of these places are not able to land.
Yet this is where helicopter pilot and Air Force Captain Mike Kingery from Golden, Colorado is spending some of the first few months of his married life.
We met actually at an Air Force school, and then we got married in Vegas.
Kingery and his wife McKay were only married 4 months when he was sent away to Afghanistan. Now she's in Japan where he's normally stationed, while he's here at war with a dangerous job, flying these modified Black Hawk helicopters into the battlefield to pick up pilots who've been shot down or soldiers who've been injured, while sometimes being shot at himself.
One of the ones we took took a bullet hole, took a 7.62, so an AK round in the front flare bucket, and punched all the flares off.
It is no doubt hard to keep a new bride and the family back home in Colorado calm when this is your workplace. Have to be careful how many details you give. And speaking of that, how do you stay connected with those loved ones when you're at war?
Okay, I'm here.
When it's nighttime in Bagram, it's morning coffee time for Deanna Leba's husband back home in Colorado. And they catch up.
So how was Alex today?
Tossed it out of her mind, just like her dad.
With a little help from the iPad. Captain Leba left her husband and kids and job as an orthopedic nurse in Colorado Springs to come serve out her duties with the Air Force Reserves as a medic in Afghanistan.
Doesn't seem to have too much swelling either.
Going on so-called bandage flights across the war-torn country, picking up wounded soldiers and treating them mid-air en route to military hospitals.
Wave your hand a little bit so I know you're still there.
She's been gone for months, but tries to FaceTime with the family daily and sends text messages throughout the day. Wartime communications come a long way from the old days when it took 6 weeks to get a letter back home.
Okay, that's done.
You're kind of choppy.
And when the signal isn't freezing up, they talk about the same things married couples sitting in the same room do.
Yes, she needs to get to school on time.
The schedules, the weather, the kids.
We've got great kids.
Saying goodbye is never easy when this is the only face-to-face contact you've had with the people you love most for more than 3 months.
All right.
Okay, I need to go.
Okay, I love you.
Okay, I love you, okay?
Okay.
All right, be careful today, okay?
I will. You too.
Okay.
Bye.
But Captain Leba and the 2,000 or so other Colorado service members currently deployed have something to look forward to. The end.
I have 10,000 kisses to go home to.
The longest war in U.S. history is winding down, and by the end of next year, most everyone sent to Afghanistan will finally be home from war after tremendous personal sacrifice. Whether it's Chris Basham of Fountain, Colorado, just 21, barely old enough to buy a beer, but facing the very adult task of serving his country in a deadly war zone.
I miss my family a bunch, close to all my family that's back in the States, and I'm not more than 45 minutes away from any of them, so I miss them a lot.
I think my mom worries about it more than I do.
Or that newlywed pilot managing to somehow find marital bliss.
We get to do the FaceTime thing like pretty much once a day, so that's nice.
Here in a place that isn't exactly ideal for a honeymoon.
Staying in touch, clearly easier now than in wars past, thanks to that strong will and that strong Wi-Fi. That's going to do it for us tonight here in Bagram, Afghanistan. We want to give a special thanks to the 455th Air Expeditionary Wing for hosting us on this long journey across the globe. And of course, thank you to those Colorado reservists who invited us here to their home away from home. I'm Jeremy Hubbard, Fox 31 Denver. Stick around, Nightside starts right now.